We
Hello, welcome back. This is part two of the Lesley Constable interview. And if you missed part one, I really recommend you go and check it out. It's all about Lesley's upbringing in Ohio and with specific reference to the Summer of Love and all the hippie stuff and all that kind of thing. So we covered an awful lot of hippie related stuff last time. And now we're going to move on to sort of the further period. And so, hello, Lesley, and thank you for coming back again. Lovely to
Oh,
see you.
hi. It's wonderful. I'm really enjoying the trip down memory lane and revisiting um all those wonderful experiences. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to pick up. We've done the sort of the 60s and to some extent into the early 70s and so on. So I guess where we are, sort of thematically at least, is the kind of the hippie dream or whatever is over or isn't over. I guess that would be the first question, really. Yeah, it's the early 70s. The big kind of hippie thing has finished, but is the hippie dream over?
I don't think so, not for a moment. No, I think that whatever got initiated, and I think that it began way before the time with the beats. I think I've referenced that before. Um, and very, many aspects of, sort of utopian living that had flitted across the United States in various ways. No, I think it's still alive and well. Uh, well, your interest one, but and also um, like the younger folks as they emerge into being and come of age, and there's always interest in what went on back then. And um, I do believe that that generation, my generation, our generation, really caused a shift that there's sort of no going back. And so I think it's still with us. Hopefully more, because there were a lot of really cool things going on at the time. And lest we forget. Um, yeah.
Yeah. We left you last time, and on end of part one, we left you living in a commune in New Mexico. So if we can pick up there,
Oh, well,
um,
yeah,
firstly,
right.
what kind of year or what's the time of this?
Well, actually, I moved out to to correct you. I moved out to New Mexico a lot later than that, continuing on my journey um, as like every hippie I ever knew. We're all travelers, and I just picked up a book by Patti Smith, uh, and it's the whole thing. It's just like the surrealists and the beats and everybody. They were travelers and they experienced a lot of different cultures. But anyhow, the commune was in actually Ohio, my hometown of Mansfield, Ohio, and it was in 1973. And it was after I decided to go and revisit England and live with my grandmother in Bristol in 1971. And also, I had gone down to Mexico and had a foray there. I'd studied Spanish as a schoolgirl, and so it was always a dream. And the Beats all hung out in Mexico too. They lived in San Miguel de Allende, and one of them, I think it was Neil Cassidy, did die. He died in Mexico. So yeah, so the commune. Well, I had all these adventures and went tried out going to university as a fine arts major at Ohio University, but decided that it wasn't for me just then. And so a bunch of pals of mine had somehow secured a mansion on the main road of our hometown, Mansfield, Ohio. It was this glorious mansion. It had belonged to like an Ohio state senator. And it had all the flowered wallpaper of bygone eras. Every room had a ornate fireplace in it. The ceilings were about 12 feet high. It had a maid's quarters. It had room after room after room, a beautiful back garden, et cetera, et cetera. But it had sort of fallen into disarray. And one of my pals rented it for like next to nothing. And so we filled it up. And I gone over any of this, I was the only chick. I was the only girl. And it was a whole bunch of guys, but I've always been one of those women who you know, was a real geek about, you know, the minutia of rock and roll bands, blah 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 blah, and the instruments they played, and so I was always one of those type people. So yeah, the odd thing is when we all decided to, there were 10 of us, uh, do communal living and have, you know, a commune in our hometown, that what ended up happening is they all assumed that I was going to be their maid and cook and bottle washer. And that wasn't sitting really well with me just because I was female, because I'm not very domestic, you know, and I like other things. And my parents even, they understood that I wasn't like that. My mother said to me at one point, "You're about as domesticated as a rattlesnake." And I don't know if that was a compliment or not. And she said, "I can't even imagine you ever like getting married or having children." Well, you know, I'm on my fourth husband right now, so I did that, and I have four children. She said at the end of her life, she said, "You know, I'm so surprised, but you're one of the best mothers I've ever met. You are far better, a far better mother than I ever was." And I went, and she was a really hypercritical person. So I went, "Wow, thanks. That was quite a compliment." Anyhow, so, you know, winding back, one of the members of the commune, his name's Myron, he was the only boy with 8 sisters. And so he grew up with the female influence, and in terms of, you know, equality and fairness, with, like, you know, him being the only boy and 8 sisters, he sort of knew how it rolled. And he really got on him too, and he formulated a list of like who was going to like wash dishes, who was going to mop the floor. And so he really aided me. It was a cool experience. Yeah, we sort of, with visiting people, we sort of housed, you know, we had spare rooms that we could house, like, you know, visiting folks, and mostly that went okay. It again was during the time when cocaine had come in, and I'd already experienced some loss of friends due to drugs, and especially motorcycles, with no helmets. And yeah, I was, you know, pretty experimental, pretty open, but at that point, I was starting to wind down regarding any of my experimentation because I realized I didn't need it, and that it was getting in my way. I didn't really, I mean, I sort of popped out, um, with a really busy mind, an active mind, and also lots of means to, you know, very creative and all that. And I really wanted to uh, reserve all that I had and was and am still to the enterprise of, you know, creative activity. And I felt like the drugs really hampered it. It really got in the way. Um, but that's not the case for everybody. Anyhow, there was a lot of experimentation, and, you know, I dealt with it pretty good. I didn't mind. And there were, in any communal situation, it all sort of sifts down in terms of who's in charge and what roles one plays, as you can imagine. Have you lived communally before?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was a disaster. So I'm quite interested to sort of see how it worked, or if it worked at your
Okay,
end. Yeah.
cool. Excellent. I sensed that. Okay, cool. We can compare notes. I love that. Um, yeah, it can go any which way. And it's all about agreement, and it's all about everybody agreeing or not to sort of be on the same page, and to um yeah, to agree with what the terms are. uh I don't know what methods were used, if there were any, or how it all went with your situation. But Myron was really staunch, probably because he had so many siblings, and had to essentially agree with them for everyone to get along. But he was really good at trying to coordinate, like weekly meetings, sometimes week meetings twice a week, and regarding how things would go. Most of the time, it stayed really, really fluid, but you know, give or take some hiccups. And yeah, I did that for a while. Yeah. Yeah, there was one fellow ensconced in the maids' quarters, um, and he had a hammock set up, and it was a room of the era with lots of windows. And I do recall at one point, little minor disasters, that one of the other commune members was really high, and he jumped into the hammock, which, if you know hammocks, did this whole ricochet swing thing, which slammed him right into one of the windows. Luckily, he didn't go out of the window, but his arm went through the window. And before anybody could stop him, he pulled it back.
Oh,
And yeah, there was, it was scary. It was a real emergency situation, because he was bleeding all over the place. And it didn't quite like completely cut. Yeah. And, but anyhow, we really had to scramble fast to get him to the ER and get him stitched up. And we all, at that point, we were all sitting around his bed. They had sort of drawn the curtains. They allowed all of us to sort of sit there while they worked on him. And all I can remember is there are his dirty bare feet hanging out over the end of the gurney or the bed or whatever, while they were working to stitch him up. And what a sight, what a experience. But he ended up being like stitched up, and he survived. But you got to be careful. You've got to, and we all just like, look before you leap. I mean, what's the old saying? Look before you leap. But anyhow, lots of different adventures. The other really cute thing about this situation was, next door was a mansion, and it had belonged to the a fellow, and this is his actual name, Dr. Lavender, who was the what's the person in the morgue? Who's the person in charge of the morgue? The person who does the inquiry when people die. I can't recall the name.
pathologist.
Oh no, not
No.
pathologist. They have a name for it in the United States. It's the I just can't recall the name. I mean, I'm being here in England, I'm on Britain, I'm like, what do you call this?
Yes. Well, the
Anyhow,
person in charge of the morgue. Yeah.
in the charge of the morgue, and deciding, it was wrong death, or accidental, or whatever. And I'll figure out the word eventually. But his he was adorable, an older fellow, and his wife was Mrs. Lavender. um and they had a grape arbor, and we had many discussions. And during that period, I married one of the other commune members, so we had this big hippie wedding. And so, but we continued to live in the commune. And so we had the reception there at the house, at the commune. And so we invited Dr. and Mrs. Lavender over for the after party, and they were completely delighted. And they were kind enough to turn a blind nose to the pervasive
That was my first thought. Yeah.
They were so they were very old, but they were like totally hip people, and they mingled so effortlessly with all the flowers and all that, the whole hippie thing, and we're absolutely delighted. And after which she referred to me always as the bride,
Uh,
which was so charming. And then she'd even say to the others, it's like, oh, where's the bride? Has she come down for her coffee yet? Because she wanted to talk to me. So from that experience and talking to Dr. Lavender, I started making wine. And I started out with grapes and I ended with, I got really into it. At one point, I had 200 bottles in the wine cellar. And I conscripted some of the guys too to help me make wine. And we all got into it. And in the United States, especially in Ohio, elderberries grow all over the place on the roadside, and they're tiny, tiny little berries, and they just grow wild. And so you have to cut, you cut them, and then you use a fork tine to get the berries off the stem. However, it's you have to remove all the stems, even they're green stems. You have to remove all of them, or when you drink the wine, it'll make your belly hurt. So we very carefully picked out all the stems, and the elderberry wine is wonderful. It's a real old fashioned, and elderberry is a real medicinal berry too, and they make tinctures of it even now to help support the immune system, and it's really associated with at that time our grandparents, Moby Grape, one of my favorite bands from the 60s, who ran into a lot of problems due to the sort of like nasty term statutory rape. They had groupies, underage groupies throwing themselves at them. And if they had sex with them, they were charged with statutory rape. And they were such a great band, but they were always in court. And so it really tanked their success. But I don't know if you know Moby Grape, but
I only know the name, truthfully.
yeah. Oh, they were a really good band. All of them could sing. All of them were crack musicians, and they came out with a lot of great songs. But there's a song that they did called "Hey Grandma," and uh, and there's a line about elderberry wine. So yeah, it was sort of known as sort of a grandparent thing. So yeah, elderberry wine. I also made dandelion wine, like Ray Bradbury's collection of short stories, dandelion wine. And I had to make sure I had a friend whose father owned a big lot in I think Lucas, Ohio, and I went with the guys and harvested the dandelions to make sure that they hadn't been treated or whatever. And so Ray Bradbury says in his book that um, about the whole process of dandelion wine, that he'd look out on his garden, and there would be a pride of lions, which are the dandelions. And so, and dandelions are also medicinal. The root is really good for, liver, taking care of the liver, et cetera, et cetera. And you can eat dandelions. Did you know that?
I don't think I've ever eaten one. No, no.
No, and they're supposed to be really healthy, nutritious for you. So anyhow, so really got into this, and my dandelion wine was the very favorite of everybody because uh, to my elderberry wine, I added raisins to help spike the alcoholic content for when it fermented, to add the sugars that created the alcohol. And then to the dandelion wine, I added the golden sultanas, which didn't interrupt the color of the wine, but also enhance the alcoholic content. So I would give it as gifts, and everybody loved it because it was like akin to whiskey in terms of how alcoholic it was. It was great. And the color of it, I can't even begin to describe with the beautiful color. Just imagine like a color of dandelion in a wine glass, and that's what you've got. So I thank Dr. Lavender for getting me into that. And I even started at that time quilting, like, oh, to make a quilt is a real Ohio thing. And then I had an herb garden that was in the classic Celtic knot with all the various herbs complementary. So I really sort of, as as all the hippies did back then, sort of going back to that older knowledge that our grandparents had of back to the earth. And there were a lot of books that came out at the time that encouraged that. I forget some of the names of them, but they were real classics, and almost everybody had them on in their libraries. And just the how to of, like, I had some friends who wanted to learn how to be a blacksmith and to keep all those old traditions alive, and leatherworking and making jewelry and learning, how to work with silver. And do you recall any of that, or are you aware of any of that effort of what the hippies did? And mostly this was commune activity too.
No, I'm not in all. I mean, theoretically, I gather this is the sort of stuff you got up to, but I've got no direct experience of any of that really, actually.
Right.
As an experiment in sort of how to live in social living with different circumstances for the nuclear family, etc. Do you think it was of its time, or I mean, I've got no idea if people do that these days, but it seems that they don't do so much.
Not so much, but there is some continuity. There is a continuation of that, and still people, especially in New Mexico, and it was for many good reasons I moved out there, because they still have bunches of people who, if they're not living communally, like for example, really close to Santa Fe, New Mexico, are the almost twin villages of Madrid, which looks like Madrid, but they pronounce it Madrid. And also Cerrillos, which is Cerrillos, which is in Spanish means little hills. And Cerrillos was a mining town. There was a lot of turquoise mines in the United States, now closed. And this actually this is Cerrillos turquoise, which is a green color, and the mine's now closed. They've been like mined out, all of it. But so there was a real tradition of just many, many, many classic, and with New Mexico too, because there is from the nearby Apaches and all the Native Americans who that's their ancestral ground, New Mexico. There are all sorts of traditions regarding making rugs and all sorts of yeah, just cultural practices, and also the whole chili tradition. So it runs really deep in New Mexico, that people are going to live off the land, because in the desert you essentially have to, and all sort of band together, because it's the whole state of New Mexico, it's just barely over 2 million people. And geographically, it's a huge, huge, chunk of land, and it's very sparsely populated. So in order to survive, people sort of like got, consolidated and, worked together. I forget what your question is. Sorry, I'm just getting
Oh,
curious.
that's okay. I was asking you about whether you thought communal living was, something that you could fit into a time frame of the perhaps 60s, 70s, 80s, but isn't really about so much now.
No.
Um, but yeah, I think you've answered that really. Okay, so moving on a little bit then, um when did you move to England? Is that coming up shortly in the story, or am I jumping the gun here?
Oh boy, there's just Mexico was before that.
Yeah.
So that was a big necessary move for me. I realized, um, oddly, in being here, I've connected with, as a poet. I'm a very prolific poet, and really connected to the international community now because of Zoom. But I've been able to connect to a whole bunch of guys, mostly guys my age, in the United States who are poets, who are hippies. We have pretty much this similar histories and the same knowledge base. So that's really cool. And also here in the UK, and realizing the similarities regarding, especially if you're connected to what would be called beat poetry, and yeah, the whole, all the synchronicity, and especially the travel, and how that's very interesting to me too, that my generation, we were ones who traveled the world and went to Europe and lived in Europe and did all these adventures when this was like en masse. This had never happened before, that so many people did their world treks from my generation and came back to the United States or else settled elsewhere. And that's really part of who we are, is we're really internationals, which is, I'm really proud to be that way too. And so just embracing different traditions, different cultures, languages, and essentially being an international community. It's just, it is shocking. It's astounding. And that's why I say that I don't think that the hippie time or the hippie movement has come to an end. It's just morphed into other things. And it's just as it would, like water, like a river flows, it would just, form tributaries and blah, 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 and take various directions. And, maybe I'm being hopeful and corny or whatever, which is a distinct possibility. And very hopeful, because I am really an optimist. But I just feel that once that got put into motion, it's continued into motion. And I don't believe it began with my generation at all. That it's still there, and it will be. But so yeah, lots of things happened. I was in Columbus, loved Columbus, Ohio. Had some really good years there. Still real connected with the Gonzo outsider artists, Charles Wentz, Rick Borg, James Beoddy, rest in peace. Levent Isaac, rest in peace. All those folks. Yeah, Charles Wentz just had a huge retrospective at the Vanderelli Room Gallery, and I've got a lot of good stories about all that too. But maybe I'll
Yeah. We
maybe
haven't
I'll,
really,
huh?
we haven't really talked about art and poetry, which is what I kind of figured would be the sort of main plank really of what we talked about today.
Right.
I think maybe poetry first. You mentioned last time your lineage, if you like, from the beat poets and so on and so forth. I wanted to sort of ask you about poetry really, because there's a couple of things that strike me from what we've been talking about. Firstly, that poetry is a very delicate medium, I think, and it strikes me that that kind of dovetails quite well with hippies. Really, that there's
Oh
a
yeah.
there's a delicate aspect to both of
Hmm.
those things, which can be really really beautiful, but also really well, like all delicate things, really, really kind of fragile is another word for delicate, isn't it? Something that isn't necessarily that you don't necessarily think of as being easy to translate to mainstream society, of being quite easy to destroy, perhaps.
Ephemeral, right?
Ephemeral. That's what the word I was looking for. Maybe that's why you're a poet and I'm not. But
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Hmm.
what do you think about that, Reed? Where do you think poetry stands in the great scheme of things?
Oh wow. That's a big question. I think poetry is one of the anchors of human existence. I will just say that bold. It's like a deep, deep, deep root system. It connects the lived human experience with the psyche, the human psyche, which from my in totally embracing early on the work of Carl Jung and his seminal um, ideas and belief systems he put into being, mostly his thinking about the collective unconscious, that we inherit an ancestral memory, that we inherit our brains as surely as we do the color of our eyes and everything else about us. And that the core brain, the brain stem, is which houses, maybe you could call it the soul, but also, he worked a lot with dreams and the mystery of dreams, and that at base we're all connected. And poetry really comes from that place, especially how I work. I just zoomed off of my Monday morning meeting, Forsaking the Mic in Exeter, brought to us by the amazing Tim King and the other poets in Devon, and now it's international. But what's often commented regarding my poems is that they just come to me as visions, and or the words just come to me, and I have to, no matter what I'm doing, if it's incoming, it just comes, and I have to stop and write it down, like just like I'm taking dictation before it gets away from me. And pretty much it's unfiltered. I hardly ever revise or edit that rough draft that comes to me. I call my art business Arte de la Musa, art from the muse. And I mean it. You can call it anything. You can call that inspiration anything you want. But some people are hardwired. I've been called like a visionary artist. I've been called a transcendental artist, and existentialist, all those things, and that's all there in my work. I believe that also poets are the chroniclers of their time, so that's one of the jobs of poetry, to experience, to be the filter, to be the communal voice for all of us who are alive at the same time, and to really take into and speak from the heart, take into us everything that's going on, and filter it through, our muse helping out, filter it, and then present it as almost a snapshot into the be here now, the moment in time that you're writing the poem. uh, Poetry is a thing of beauty of all the arts, and I'm a modern dancer, I'm a painter too, but I think of all the arts, poetry is so flexible. And you've got your performance poetry. I just did participated in a slam at the Cheltenham Poetry Festival like a week or so ago, and yeah, so whatever form it comes, it's like the raw feed from the subconscious mind, I think, and it can take any form. So it's, yeah, I could go on and on. I
Ah,
just,
that's a really lovely way of putting it. But given that it's a communal voice,
mhm.
why isn't it a louder voice these days? Why is it so sidelined and marginalized within mainstream culture?
You think? I don't know. I can't
I don't
say
know.
that.
So if I'm wrong, tell me. That's how it
Okay,
strikes
well,
me
I'm in a
compared to
community
music,
of
for instance.
international poets, and we're like a powerhouse. Yeah, we're out there active, and in any location that we all get up at the mic and say our things, and we're all publishing things, we're all sharing things. Yeah, yeah. There were events in San Francisco that I've participated in recently. Um, uh, I do a Zoom in Paris. Uh, and like I said, I have a friend, and I have friends, and I have friends all over the world who are poets, and we're doing amazing.
Well, you froze a bit there. Sorry, Liz.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm still I appreciate that, but I do wonder if there's an aspect of performing poetry to other poets rather than, so there's a bit of a kind of bubble going
Yeah,
on.
possibly.
And
Possibly.
because I'm kind of guessing that in centuries gone by, poets
Hmm.
had far kind of more bigger profiles really within the kind of rest of society. And even as recently as perhaps the late 60s, early 70s, you had Allen Ginsberg performing Howl in the UK, this is.
Yeah.
And people crediting that with kind of being the birth of the hippie movement in the UK, where people
Hmm.
realised it was actually, because I think it was the Albert Hall, there was a lot of people who for the first time realised there was a lot of them and thought, hey, we're onto something here. But
Wow.
the takeaway from that really to me is that poetry in that respect seemed bigger then. Bigger as in, had a higher profile, spoke to more
Oh,
people.
right. I see what you're saying, but bless Ginsburg. Boy, I love that guy, huh? Yeah, and they had, like I said, they had a presence in Mexico, which of course, that's a well-trodden path, which of course I was going to go down. But yeah, no, I see what you're saying. And here in Margate, where I live, it's the centenary of T.S. Eliott's The Wasteland. And our friend Leslie Malone had pointed out that there are no events planned here in Margate. Why not? Let's do it. And so, but yeah, in the past, you're right. Like some of the poets were like rock stars.
Mm.
Damn straight, they were.
And Bob Dylan was a rock star, and I
And
think he's
Bob Dylan
crazy.
was a rock star, and also Leonard
Yeah.
Cohen, who are like really damn fine, and Joni Mitchell, damn fine writers, damn fine poets. I don't know, things have gotten dispersed, and there are just so many more factions and uh, sidelines and um, like I said, tributaries to the mainstream as as of course would happen with the hippie movement, that it just spread and it's become dispersed and maybe too dispersed because and you have to name and place everything. As an art critic, um um possibly the first job of an art critic is not the thumbs up, thumbs down, or Siskel and Ebert. It's actually an informed dialogue about art, and assessment only takes care of a little bit. There's more like interpretation, analysis, blah 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 blah. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with this, but oh, like the whole naming and placing of every artist that comes into being. It's like you've got to categorize them. And so maybe the job of an art critic is sort of naming and placing where that particular artist fits in the mainstream of things and historical stream of things. And so maybe that is not going, I mean, maybe that hasn't gone on with poetry, that there is a lineage that one can trace. And then there's this whole page poet versus performance poet, so which is sort of factionalized, and the poetry community, and splitting of hairs and that sort of thing. And yeah, and then there's the sonnet poet, and then I mean, I think it's so amusing here in the UK. When I first started performing to, like Zoom, and they weren't really used to some Americans, and here I am like the token American, and I'm like, you might my lingo and stuff. And then I come out with these like incredible like rants, like stream of consciousness stuff. And it was being called free verse. Like I haven't heard free verse since like middle school, my middle school English teacher. And it gets called prose poetry. And it's like, I haven't heard that. It's just damn poetry. Like Ginsburg supposedly broke the mold because, it's just poetry. You don't have to, free verse is like, okay, you sonnet writer, I
Yeah.
don't I don't write no damn sonnets, thanks, and I don't rhyme my shit at all. It's like, shut up. I hate to be the B word, and I hate to be a snob, but like open it up, man. Open wide the aperture and see what you can see. I even wrote a poem called Aperture, you know. Open up the aperture, open up the lens wide and see what you can see. What do you see with that lens wide open, you know? Stop making everything so bloody small. So that's me.
Okay, and in the context of opening up, you do other kinds of art as well.
Yeah, I'm a painter.
You paint. What do you paint?
Oh,
Pictures, I suppose, but you know.
yeah, it's hippie trippy stuff. Uh,
Okay.
here's one of them.
Okay, so that's abstract, isn't that? At the risk of wanting to define everything. Yeah.
It's called Dancing with the Moon, and I've been I've been called a visionary artist by curators, museum curators, and I've been called, you know, visionary, transcendental, blah 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 blah. And the word I would probably use to describe it is borrowing loosely from the uh Latin American or Hispanic writers of a couple decades ago who were deemed having with having created what's called magic realism, like Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Julio
Mm.
Cortázar and all those folks. I would just call it magic realism because it's basically loosed on basically based on loosely based on you know something real, but you know, it's almost like people have like likened my stuff to Chagall, blah blah blah, where people float and anything can happen. They can sprout horns and whatever, and sort of mythological and uh, what would you say? Hmm, yeah, sort of, you know, very Jungian, sort of based in the collective unconscious and dreamscapes, you know, all that sort of thing. The inner dialogue, I guess I would say. And again, these things just come to me, and I do my best to sort of capture them, get them down before they flit away. I don't know what that mechanism is. I think other people have it. I've talked to enough artists that happens to other artists. So
Mm.
I don't think it's anything all that unique.
That was going to be my next question, actually, about whether it did come to you in the same way that the words in the poetry come to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got to be really, really careful when I'm walking around. And I've talked to other artists, and it's like invariably things will come to you when you're one driving a car. Then you either have to make the decision to try to get it down while you're driving dangerous. I had like a friend of mine go, promise me, if a poem comes to you while you're driving, to pull over, because they had seen
Well,
me
yeah.
try to write the poem while I was driving. It's like, don't do that. And then the other thing is while I'm walking, which is cool because I always carry a notebook with me and I'm always prepared, or in the shower, which is also like inconvenient because there you know, you're going to write on paper and you're all wet. So, you know, but anyhow, and I'm not alone, you know, I'm not alone in any of this. I've discussed it with enough poets. It's like, God, don't you hate when a poem comes when, you know, whatever, fill in the blank. So, no, they whatever mechanism goes on, that happens too. And I guess with the Exeter group, uh I've gained a few appreciators of people who were using more formal considerations like sonnets and pen, you know, other you know, rhyming things, and some of them have started doing more experimental work. And today, one of my fellow poets came out with this totally gonzo stream of consciousness poem, and I'm like, yay! So I may be having an influence, but that because he really pays attention to yeah, to he thought it was fascinating what I was talking about. But hey, you know, we all influence one another and it's all good at the end of the day. So again, I've drifted off. I forgot what you're initiating.
No problem at all, Lesley. It's all very interesting, which is
Mm,
good.
yeah.
So when did you arrive in Margate, and what's your life like in Margate?
Oh, it's quite sort of cloistered now because what I'm doing is I'm trying to get my poetry under control. And my joke is I've got to tell the poems to just settle down, because I've written too many and they're out of control. And I do have a book, but I'm trying to gather them into another book. And it's or several. I've actually have reached out to any number of poets to give me any suggestions about how to structure them. And I'm not going to fuss around with uh, being competitive and submitting for competitions, and I'm not into that. I don't care. I don't, I'm ambitious, but I'm more ambitious personally with myself. So I just want books in order to get some order over the poems. It's like, okay, these are in this one and those are in this one. And I'm not opposed to self-publishing at all. And devil take the hindmost. Again, I'm a hippie. When have I ever played it straight? I don't. So, and I don't care. So, but
Uh,
anyhow,
so Margate, yes.
yeah,
When
Margate's cool. I love the sunsets. I love that Turner lived here. I understand knowing his paintings. Yeah, I've got a better grasp for his work living here. The sea is can have lots of different moods and lots of different colors. I asked somebody once walking by, and I said, "Look how milky the sea looks today. I love when it looks milky, and it sort of fades into the sky." And the fellow said, "Oh, that's because at base there's a lot of limestone underneath, which gives it that milky quality." And I was really happy to hear that. But in the sky, I mean, with the clouds, how they come in, it's stunning. And then it's it's always an inspiration. And then it is a bit cold. And I live at sort of at the top of the hill, up above the Turner Contemporary. And so I live right on the front. And whoo, boy, those winds can howl. And I love it. I love the fierceness of it. I just never tire of it. The people here are so cool too. I feel so comfortable because other places I've lived in England, um, there's that sort of fussy thing that drives me nuts. Like when, like when you're going to go get your tea, um, I go to the Witherspoons a lot and I don't want to hear about it. I like Witherspoons. Shush. I don't care what his politics are. I don't know the politics of anywhere else I'd go get tea or coffee. So why should I give a shit, right? Anyhow, there you are. Yeah, it's like McDonald's. There's one in every town in the UK, and you know what you're getting, and it's whatever. It's easy.
certain
Anyhow,
business model in that respect, yeah.
yeah, no, and I like it. Anyhow, so you go get your tea, and there's this person in front of you who's doing their tea ritual of dunking it 3 times, wrapping it around the spoon, squeezing every little bit out of it, stirring excessively, and adding just the dollop of milk. It's like, would you just stop? Anyhow, just go for it. Anyhow, I don't know where I was going with the Witherspoons, but no, yeah, I just sort of got thrown off track, but yeah, no, I like how gonzo the people are here. They're also everywhere else in England, I just wear like really whatever I feel like. I mean, at one point I was like this hippie mom, and I'd go to parent teacher conference at my children's elementary school, and I'd have on a hat that I'd gotten from my grandmother that had fur and the veils, and then I wore like red cowboy boots with fishnet stockings, old furs, because I wanted to like honor the animal that died by wearing the fur and not making it useful. And then lots of scars and so much jewelry I clanked. And my children's like, oh, mom, why can't you dress like the other moms? I was like, no way. So anyhow, like living other areas in England, it's like, oh God, and I want to feel comfortable walking around in sort of my uniform, whatever it is. And here in Margate, I'm in constant delight and awe of my fellow women, their fashion statements. And it's like, yeah, just pretty gonzo. And I'm like, oh, dude, I really like your outfits. Like, oh, thanks. And so I feel very, very integrated as part of the community of creatives. And also any conversation I can start up or somebody starts up with me, it's a lot of fun. So I really feel like I found a place that really suits me. Yeah.
But you've also got a house in Mexico as well,
Yeah.
which is really quite interesting for me. I mean, this is horrendously ignorant, perhaps, but my first thought, and this is definitely because I've been informed by films and so on, I think my
Yeah.
first thought about Mexico is that it's dangerous,
Yeah.
that that it's not the safest of places. So do you want to
Right.
put me right on that one?
Well, yeah. Yeah, the other thing too is I sort of co-own it. So it's not all, yeah, yeah. So it's sort of the usual hippie thing. But anyhow, yeah, no, Mexico's not dangerous at all. If you're in Sinaloa, areas of Sinaloa, be careful. Acapulco was sort of taken over by the cartel, but you just got to keep alert and just like anywhere else. I was in Barcelona when the whole independence thing, and they showed it they showed it as being citywide and rampant. When I was there at the moment in Barcelona, and it was only like one street corner on one street. Same with Mexico. It's like, oh, come on, guys, don't be so ignorant.
Yeah,
Like, the lens of a camera, like in a particular location, is not the whole country. Thanks.
totally. There was a situation just like that during the lockdown, or when people were coming out of lockdown, and they were showing how busy London was with a just one kind of camera pointing down Old Compton Street in Soho, which was packed. But people in London were saying the rest of London, however, was still deserted, and it's just not an
Yeah.
accurate picture. So
Yeah, no, 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 no. So no, and believe me, there are like various areas. The place I live in though was designated Pueblo Mágico, which is magic town, and which is to retain the cultural heritage of the place and not get overdeveloped. And with that, a lot of federal money came in and also protection. And so sometimes there are truckloads of um, armed, military and transport vehicles that go through town just to remind, and you want to see them, just to remind everybody that everybody's safe. And that's, the government doesn't want that sort of thing going on. And yeah, you don't have to worry. It's only in certain areas and only in small areas of certain areas. So you just, I don't pay it in mind. Plus I'm not a scaredy cat at all. But yeah, the whole impulse to go down to Mexico was again just my adventurousness and wanting to connect with the culture. And like I said, I was there in 73 and got a wonderful taste of it. And I love everything about Mexico. One thing is the color. There's color all over the place, and the people are amazingly sensitive and kind, very kind people. When they say mi casa es tu casa, they mean it. They will give you the shirt off their back. If anybody needs help, they will help you. It's just an amazing culture. And it's pretty in odd ways. Uh, I mean, they really honor the Blessed Virgin. So in many, many ways, it's a matriarchy. There's a lot of respect for motherhood. There's a lot of respect for mothers. There's a lot of respect for the female ways of things, and which is really wonderful. Uh,
So it's a Catholic country then.
it's a Catholic country. Women get a lot of respect. I mean, I have 4 kids, and so I've only been treated with great respect and kindness. And it's a culture in which one bows to one, we bow to one another, which is really charming. I don't mind bowing whatsoever to honor people. And yeah, it's I would say too, it's a deeply spiritual place. The the ways and the culture of the ancestors still pretty much operate there, also, and just amazing traditions and food
Yes. Yes.
and tequila.
Now you're talking my language. Yeah.
There is actually a town called Tequila, Jalisco, and I've been there, and they
Really?
have all the distilleries there, and they give you samples in like a mug full of a sample of tequila. And so you walk around to the various distilleries and you're like lucky. You're like, I've got to go to a hotel room now. I can't drive. So anyhow, it's an amazing, like I said, it's an amazing place. And it's a very good place for creatives to be because it's so accepting and of the creative energy. It's already sort of built in that poets are honored there, and so are visual artists. And I sort of got known in my village as one of the poets. I did a lot of poetry events, open mic, sort of cut my teeth getting up at the mic there, like what 12 or so years ago.
Is that in
And
English or Spanish?
in English, there, I mean, it's there are a lot of English speakers in Mexico, and also in the town I live in, it's really international, and it's got a lot of artists and chefs and foodies, so it's really sort of accepting of various cultures, and so Spanglish is freely spoken.
Right. Right.
Pretty hilarious, but no, it's yeah, I just see that there's so many connecting threads between others that I just don't see that. I just don't walk around seeing difference. I walk around seeing sameness. And
Yeah.
so
That's a nice way of looking at it.
yeah.
Do you, how do you divide your time between Margate and Mexico?
Well, I'd like to go back as soon as possible, but my Mexican partner who is here with me, we're still waiting for the outcome of an immigration application filed over like almost 2.5 years ago.
That must be quite stressful.
Well, yeah, because 8 of his family members died during COVID, and he wasn't able to see them.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're trying to escalate that. But the theory was to divide the time, and I'm sure that we might be able to get back with that if and everything. Well, there's been the Afghanistan crisis and Ukrainian crisis, and then the whole Brexit thing with
Mm.
so I guess we just sort of got backlogged or whatever, but we'll see how it goes. But no, I mean the whole thing that we had planned is when it's really, really hot in Mexico during the summer and it gets really blisteringly hot, is to come here and get a van and work the festivals, like selling, because I at some of the Mexican markets I'd sold my prints and postcards of my paintings, and also my poetry book, and then we would do the circuit of doing readings and open mics in our area. And so the whole idea was to play it again, Sam's, so to speak, here, and just like sort of travel around the country in a van and set up shop selling our wares. And he's a painter and poet too. So
Okay, right, right.
so we have a lot of paintings to make into posters and stuff and sell. And he's planning a book too. So it's a lot of fun. Why not?
If people want to get hold of your book, what's it called?
Oh, okay. It's called Entry Point.
And where would they
Uh,
get that?
Entry Point colon time poems of time, place, being. And it's available on Amazon and World of Books. And it used to be available at the London Depository, Book Depository. But yeah, it's available online. And yeah, I did it in 2015. I had my three book launches in Columbus, Ohio, which worked out really well. It paid for my trip to Columbus, Ohio, and I got to see all my pals again. So yeah. Oh, I forgot to tell you the story. Maybe you'd like to hear of being called Satan's handmaiden.
That sounds too good to miss. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think I told Lesley. She liked the story. It was pretty funny. I was an art gallery curator as well as being an art critic, and it was through the Ohio State University, one of their branch campuses in Newark. And Ohio is parts of Ohio can be considered part of the Bible Belt.
Right.
And this was in like 1990, I believe. And I was responsible for putting together monthly exhibitions of various artists. And I asked for a call for entries and got slides and etc. And I had an art selection committee made up of a lot of the other instructors and professors, etc. And so we met every year to decide who was going to have shows. And one of the artists was fellow I already mentioned, James or Jim Beoddy, now no longer with us. And he was the cartoonist, political cartoonist for the Columbus Free Press, total hippie, and did these amazingly funny and great like political cartoons every week for the next issue. And so also an amazing painter, completely. I think he did have some training, but pretty much self-taught. Real gonzo stuff. You can look him up too, James Beoddy, Beoddy. It'll blow your mind. Also Charles Wentz, and he built a sort of a fun house called Wentz World, and you could look at that stuff too. And I've actually like been a guest and stayed in the attic, and so I was sort of the bat in the belfry. But you'll love some of these people. And Rick Borg, Rickborg, really wonderful artists, and they were my peeps. And so as an art critic, I sort of was associated with the outsider promoting and and also as a curator, the outsider artists. And these were this was my group, right? And so yeah, the committee decided to grant James Beoddy a one-person show. Excellent. And for the month of November, I do recall. And so right before that, the curator of the Cincinnati Arts Center in Cincinnati, Ohio, on the Ohio River, which is, again, the Bible Belt swoops through Cincinnati. Dennis Berry, because Robert Mapplethorpe had recently died, wanted to honor Mapplethorpe by presenting like a one-person retrospective of Mapplethorpe's work. And do you know anything about Mapplethorpe?
Patti Smith connection, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But he was gay and did a lot of amazing photographs, very sensitive ones of nude bodies, often pairing males paired up. And so he put that together with that fast. He was arrested in charges of public indecency, and he was jailed.
Jesus.
I
They was
know.
taking photographs. Wow.
No. He put in the exhibition. It was Mapplethorpe's work, but he was the curator who put that in the
Oh,
Cincinnati Art Center.
sorry. I'm with,
So
yes.
as the curator, he was arrested for public indecency for
Wow.
presenting this art. And it was a lot of access TV channels at the time, and it was his um trial was daily was broadcast daily on this access TV. So we all the artists watched it, and it was just a travesty. And he was jailed, and eventually he was found to be acquitted, and that his sentence, it was time served, but he had been jailed. So yeah, he lost his job due to that. And what ended up happening is that he got picked up by the Cleveland, Ohio Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as the curator there, and stayed there many years, which was a much better fit for him. But you can imagine how that ran through the whole community. And then there
Yeah.
was this group in Chicago, which is sort of the big city for Ohio is Chicago. Um, you know, Illinois, big city. And so there was a group called Arts Midwest that put on a symposium called Freedom of Expression in the Arts, because of the whole copycat thing of this happening to Mapplethorpe, especially in the Midwest. And so what happened is that right on the heels of this, Beoddy's show opened. As soon as it was open, the next day I went to I taught there too. I taught studio arts and introduction to the arts at the university, also as well as being a curator. So I went into the university, and the secretary was waiting for me. She saw me and she said, wait. And so I went to use my keys to get into the gallery, and they had brown paper over the windows. The door was like glass and windows and stuff, and they changed the key. And she said, Dean Greenfield wants to see you right away. And I said, why? And so I get into he was the dean, and I get into his office, and he was really angry at me, and he goes, you did it on purpose, didn't you? And I said, what? Oh, but we'd had the opening. Okay, this was a few days before. We had the opening for the gallery, and wine, hors d'oeuvres, blah blah. Everyone came. Everybody was toasting Beoddy. He was the belle of the ball, sort of this weirdo who laughed like anyhow. Also, he had these two alter egos called Goblin Hood and Buckethead, and he dressed up as them. And George Bush Sr. Came to Columbus, Ohio, to open Ameriflora, this whole big thing. And Beoddy was positioned by where the cavalcade would go by, with a stalk of broccoli to shake at George Bush Sr., because George Bush Sr. did not like broccoli, to exorcise the demons of war out of George Bush Sr. And uh,
Right.
a, a guy who we all knew was doing a documentary on Beoddy, right? So he got captured all on footage that this vehicle stopped, and a whole bunch of Secret Service came out and tackled Beoddy to the ground with his Goblin Hood costume on and stuff, and took him away. but anyhow, Beoddy's a real trip. Yeah, I love Beoddy so much. He also had this alter ego called like Buckethead. Anyhow, long story. But anyhow, so belle of the ball. Beoddy was happy as a clam. All the professors were really happy. Everybody was really happy. Then I guess that behind the scenes, the Christian right wing got a hold of this exhibition. There was one painting of Beoddy. It was about like his girlfriend breaking up with him and being sad, but it was this whole thing of like, you'll see the painting if you look at his stuff, of Beoddy walking up into the jaws of hell, whatever, like a skull. And the title of the painting's Beoddy's Inferno. Well, they riveted on that, and saying that it was like demonic work. And they closed the show. It made the front page. Dean Greenfield was really upset with me. He said that I'd done it on purpose. And I said, Dean Greenfield, it was the committee who also selected it. It wasn't just me. And nonetheless, they closed the gallery for the whole rest of the semester. And I lost my job, and I had 3 children I was raising. But anyhow, the other offshoot of this is I was called Satan's handmaiden
By who?
by the Christian right wing.
Wow.
And like, you know what I quipped? Oh, Satan's handmaiden. What? I can't be Satan?
Yeah, you should have tried harder.
Well, I mean, what are you gonna do? You gotta like, you gotta fly in the face of all this stuff. So it really threw me for a loop. And then I said to the dean, I said, I'm in the middle of writing my master's thesis, dean, and I'm a single parent of 3 children. Why would I do anything on purpose? I support good art.
Mm.
Tim Beoddy is an amazing painter, and he doesn't deserve this, and neither do I. I mean, I kept teaching, but I mean, it just was just terrible. And so Arts Midwest came into the picture, and they did this whole symposia on um, you know, freedom of expression in the arts and self-censorship. And I was a focal point of that in Columbus. And Beoddy got up and he made this amazing speech saying that, you know, applauding me, saying that I was on the front line of, just having the courage to show art that was controversial and put it out there. And then I was asked, did it cause me to self-censor? And yeah, it did. I mean, it was really painful for me to just really believe in freedom of expression in the arts and just get hammered by that.
Yeah.
I
It's,
got a so I'm
the
sorry, go
last
ahead.
interview I did with somebody had a very similar story set in Britain, where a place called the ICA, where there was an exhibition in 1976, and some Tory MP called these. It was all over the papers how controversial it was. Some Tory MP said these people are wreckers of civilization. So you've got this kind of theme going on, haven't you? Really, of people getting so over the top in their reaction to what is actually just a bit of art. And the easiest thing to do if you don't like it is just ignore it, quite frankly. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's really fascinating. I think I'm going to wind it up here, Lesley, because
Yeah.
it's been yet another fascinating chat. Uh, so yeah, I mean, yeah, again, we've covered. I've been making little notes about what we've covered, and we've got through a real lot yet again. So
I hope that I was responsive and on point, but unfortunately with someone's history and someone's life, it's it opens up the like, oh, that opens up the floodgates, and then you just go on and on and on.
well, that's
Sorry.
great. That's what I want, really. I want the floodgates to open, because that's it's the stuff of life, isn't it? Really,
Mhm.
art, poetry, etc., etc. Self-expression is the stuff of life, and that's yeah. I think you've said some really fascinating things about that. So I'm going to go away and listen to all this again. Actually, well, not right
Excellent.
this second, but I will be doing that and then putting it onto YouTube. So I'll finish the recording now. And then I'll just have a quick chat to say thank you after that. But
Okay.
for now, I'd like to say Lesley Constable, or Satan's handmaiden, as you're all saying now. Thank you ever so much for this interview on the last one. Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Thanks very much.